Hi, I'm Bobby, and this is our giant squishy couch. It's far too long to lean back in and touch your feet to the floor unless you're like 9 feet tall, and it would completely swallow anyone under 95 pounds like a blazed no-face.
I like bacon, you little freshman piggies!
Basically a Chuck E. Cheese ball pit. It's comfortable for certain situations, but it's not perfect for every situation. It is absolutely the right couch to sit on during an evening of botanically enhanced cartoon consumption. It is the perfect couch for a Tuesday, or for watching regular show. One night, red-eyed and optimally altered, I was watching said cartoon. And if you've seen even like one episode, then you've picked up on the formula. In order to solve what is usually a pretty mundane problem, two slacker friends, Mordecai and Rigby, blow the whole issue out of proportion, usually summoning something supernatural or cosmically horrific in the process. Their world is bonkers, and the messes they get themselves into are also bonkers, but thanks to a varied and complex cast of characters, it feels less like a sci-fi epic and more like a sitcom than just about any other cartoon of its time. It's essentially a slice of life comedy infused with the best elements of all of my favorite 80s and 90s stoner movies. Which was fortunate for me because there, in that massive couch, in my altered state of consciousness, I started to notice something that I hadn't before.
Those guys.
The main cast are, assumedly, all of different ages and spread across a wide range of adult life situations. Mordecai and Rigby's ages are stated outright in the first episode as 23.
Dude, we're 23 years old. We shouldn't be busting holes in walls.
And the supporting cast are all coded differently. Eileen and Margaret are a few years younger, normal college age. Muscle Man and High Five Ghost Reed is in that, transitional time of maybe like mid-30s. Benson is an established adult, likely in his 40s, while Skips is a spry, several hundred. But Reed's kind of more like a man in his 50s, and Pops is probably somewhere in his 60s, I'd say, though. He's a hard one to pin down.
I don't know. Pops is kind of weird.
He might need his own video. Subscribe if you'd be into that. While a lot of this is admittedly just my own interpretation, when viewed through this lens, it's made watching the show so much more fun and interesting, and it got me thinking, how does a show with a cast with such a wide age range deal with ageism? Because obviously, with this premise, there's no way that it can't. Thus began an odyssey of watching a lot of regular show. Like, a lot. And by using a couple of the examples that I've gleaned, I can tease out some interesting ideas about how those of us who grew up on media like this see people who are older than us, imagine what aging is like, and maybe a few lessons about how we can do it well, because like it or not, we're all getting old right now. Whew, damn, that's kind of heavy. Let me try again. We're all destined to wither and return to the dust from whence we sprang. Nailed it. In the late 2000s, Cartoon Network was looking to age up its programming and implement a new slate of shows aimed at the same audience that had grown up with its previous generation of content. J.G. Quintel, then just a young CalArts grad, had been making waves with a couple of student films that he'd been shopping around now for a couple of years. Two in the AM PM, an explicit and absolutely hilarious short about two overnight gas station attendants on an acid trip, and The Naive Man from Lollyland, which actually aired already in 2005 on Nicktoons Network. Both of these shorts included early versions of character designs that would later appear in regular show, as well as the more explicit versions of what would eventually become more ambiguous themes in the series. Like, there's just no way to rule out hallucinogenic drug use as catalyzing events in like half of the show's plots.
Coffee.
In the original pitch for regular show's pilot, the evidence of the more adult themes is clear, and in the first couple of seasons, there's a lot more innuendo.
I can't believe you're going to a fist pump concert just for some lady pecs.
But there's also evidence of a more relaxed tone overall. The character voices feature a lot less of the over-the-top affectations and screaming that were a mainstay of cartoon humor already. They address themes like family problems, lost love, and broken trust. And, to the point of this video, the representation was also different. It was a show that was obviously aimed at a slightly older audience than others on the network at the time, and so it featured characters that were older too. When the show aired in 2009, I was 21. This show was aimed directly at me, but as a young college lad, I had certain ideas about what it meant to get older, and none of them were either very realistic or very positive. I was studying guitar, and all I wanted to do was be on stage and tour and play music. I had no long-term plans. Hell, I couldn't even imagine life after 30. And so, ass planted 5 inches deep into my couch, hey, thoroughly receptive to these undertones, my blazed AF couch-confined self slowly developed a coherent thought. By coding all of its main characters as belonging to different age groups, it gave young people like me then, and especially those younger than me, the opportunity to engage with people from different age groups as regular folks. Most of my interactions with older people when I was younger happened across invisible barriers of social roles. But in regular show, the heroes were all different ages, and they all contributed their own viewpoints, not just through group roles, but as complex people with backstories, talents, and lives. It let the writers address problems from different perspectives without seeming preachy, and it validated those viewpoints organically. I can imagine that I'm not the only person who's found that valuable, whether they were aware of it at the time or not. Ageism is a complicated topic. Like any unconscious bias, it's not something that just goes away once you've realized that it exists. It's a pervasive attitude that gets taught to us from the day that we're born. I can easily think back to times when I've thought, man, they look good for their age. Or, it's so inspiring to see an old person learn something new. The thought itself feels charitable in the moment, but the underlying assumptions are really anything but. I mean, how many people have been completely proven wrong by writing somebody off because they were young? People think aging makes us ugly, weak, grumpy, set in our ways, lame, and yeah, our bodies do wear out, and it sucks that we have to get old eventually, but when our attitudes towards people change because of their appearance, or how we suppose they ought to be just because of these stereotypes, what does that say about us? Do we really think people are worth less for having lived longer? I think a lot of ageist attitudes stem from a fear of our own mortality. Seeing someone older or past their prime reminds us somewhere deep down that we'll get there too someday. That we can't be young and relevant and at our strongest or most youthful forever. It's normal and healthy to grapple with that stuff. It shows that you're self-aware, that you're paying attention. It can make you kinder. But it also highlights some of our society's pretty shaky criteria for defining a person's worth. I'd argue that another contributor to ageism is that a lot of people make crude calculations in their brains about someone else's worth based on the amount of life that they have ahead of them. And there's a pragmatism to this that's kind of hard to dismiss. I think like most people, I really hate this thought experiment, but indulge me for a moment and think about solving the trolley problem and choosing between a 10-year-old or a 70-year-old. It's ugly to think about, but most people would probably choose to rescue the 10-year-old from the runaway train. But most of our decisions in life aren't that dire, and even fewer are so binary. Ruthless calculations about the hypothetical value society receives from an individual based solely on how far into their future their existence might stretch, and what they might do with that time is really a pretty cynical outlook on humanity. According to the World Health Organization's 2021 report on ageism, which, I gotta say y'all, seemed a little phoned in addition to the billions of dollars discriminatory hiring and employment attitudes cost countries by thinning workforces and depriving organizations of their most experienced laborers, the cost on people's well-being is pretty horrific. Depression, isolation, self-loathing, and it happens because our skin sags and we can't deadlift as much? That just seems worth re-examining to me. Yes, I know, I have a beard now. Deal with it. It has been some time. One more for the road. Oh, that is delicious and full of whiskey. Ageism is a topic that, to be honest, I just really didn't get until I was a little bit older. I mean, like, sure, I understood that people who looked differently got treated differently, but I was also young, talented, and at least reasonably attractive, which already meant that I was the victim of something else that I had exactly zero understanding of. My own privilege. Growing up, I was taught that the US was a meritocracy. I thought that hard work was the only deciding factor in whether or not you got what you wanted in life. I didn't realize just how difficult we can make things for those who just don't fit our manufactured ideas of what an ideal human being is. I don't know. This meritocratic framing also completely leaves out the experiences of people in minorities who are seen as outsiders to those who are in the in crowd. And I've never known what it's like to have someone move to walk on the other side of the street just because of what my skin color is. I've never had anyone ask me, no, where are you really from? And though as a man with Cherokee heritage, I've studied the atrocities of the Indian Removal Act and the racism that's the bedrock of my country's westward expansion, I just look straight up white. So I've received nothing but the benefits of being the majority race in a rich country built on exploiting and manipulating minorities, including Native Americans. It would be utter foolishness to think that these ways of thinking haven't persisted, and that the systems designed to benefit white people at the expense of other races aren't still at play less than 200 years later. But that's a topic for another video. This veneer of meritocracy, this narrative also leaves out people with developmental differences and neurodivergence. For instance, the adjoining neighborhood to where we live right now has a monthly community magazine which features photos of different families who live in the neighborhood on the cover of each issue. My wife and I were skimming through one which had a family on the cover with 2 children. But when we arrived at the write-up inside the magazine, though, it turned out that they didn't actually have 2 children. They had 3. Their 3rd daughter had Down syndrome and had been left out of her own family's cover photo. I don't know who made that choice or why it was made, but no matter the reasoning, it still breaks my heart. In addition to more obvious problems like bullying, discrimination can look differently. It can look like becoming totally invisible to other people.
I recommend Chloe Cooper Jones's book Easy Beauty for further reading on how people's disabilities affect the way that they're seen and also how they're allowed to move around within our society.
She's a Pulitzer Prize winning author who's lived with a disability that causes her chronic pain and limited mobility, and it's just so worth reading. Aside from racism and ableism, we also discriminate based on simple, arbitrary beauty standards. I guess they're not simple. They are arbitrary though. Realistically, some people are born prettier than others, and it's been proven time and again that they live happier and more privileged lives, at least as long as they remain young and attractive. Because in the end, there's one great equalizer that we're all eventually subjected to, providing we survive long enough to experience it. The reward that our bodies and minds will always eventually reap, no matter our successes or failures in life, no matter how strong or attractive we've always been, is the slow decline preceding our own expiration. We cover up wrinkles with creams and strategically cut clothes. We jump from workout to delay the loosening of our tendons and the weakening of our bones. And don't get me started on the stupid fucking magazines that persist at grocery store checkout counters that shamelessly peddle outright lies about the next superfood or fad diet. Our culture is youth obsessed and afraid of aging, and I totally get that. I'm 34, I've always been really into fitness and sports, but I've experienced a few injuries over the past few years that refuse to heal, and now I can't do some of the things I used to be able to do anymore, and that sucks. But with age, possibilities inevitably begin to close up. Slowly at first, but with time and maybe a few bouts of bad luck, it starts to get really fast. I also feel like I need to say that it's an absolute lie that age brings with it wisdom just on its own, but it's absolutely true that certain wisdom is just unattainable without this winnowing of capacity and the clarity of mind and purpose that comes along with that. And yet, rather than making space in our communities and dinner tables for people who are older and further along than us, we constantly make clear that those generations aren't welcome at our parties, in our conversations, or even in our media.
That's a different story when it comes to our government, though, but gerontocracy is far too massive a subject to tackle in this video, so carry on.
Ageism is a real thing. It's discrimination. It is harmful like all other forms of discrimination. And we need more media that addresses it by showing us the way the world could be if people were allowed to exist without the weight and stigma attached to their differences. And that's something I really love about Regular Show.
So okay, ageism is a thing and it sucks ass for the older and younger cohorts in our society to be discriminated against just because of how they appear or how long they've lived or could live, rather than based on their ability or ideas. So how does Regular Show, a cartoon with a wide range of age representation, deal with this problem? Well, it's kind of complicated. When I first encountered Regular Show, Mordecai and Rigby were not only where I was in life, but as a creative person who loved video games and music a hell of a lot more than my otherwise more career-oriented friends, I wanted to have fun, I wanted to make cool shit, and hang out.
All-nighter, all-nighter, all-nighter.
It really resonated with me how they're continually trying to get out of responsibility, put them in deeper and deeper trouble. And it also led to more outrageous adventures, and I was hungry for adventure more than literally anything else.
I'm gonna be climbing the height of Everest while doing obstacles.
100 miles and more than 1,000 obstacles.
I'm feeling shitty.
Nothing has changed. But aging was always going to happen, and it has. I'm really healthy and athletic, but I'm not as gas. I'm more sick than gas, sadly. That doesn't slap. This isn't working. Now I find I identify the most with Muscle Man. I understand what it's like to see your priorities changing, to have a harder time losing weight, to care a shit ton less about what people think about your weight anyway, and also to have a partner who accepts you for who you are and doesn't want to change you. And that is gas. Which is sick. And I've also seen some shit in my time. I've had experiences and phases. I've traveled and seen lots of rad places. I've met inspiring people. And having come out on the other side of those things, I have perspectives on my life that I didn't before. I've changed my mind radically on a lot of things that I thought I'd always believe, experienced massive psychological and ideological shifts. So glad I never got that cross tattoo. Those experiences mean I can see myself in Benson and Skips too, and that's rad. They're genuinely interesting characters, and their experiences and actions often help the group solve problems that Mordecai and Rigby just aren't equipped to handle. And they don't just offer advice either. They fight alongside everyone else, and seeing that is really powerful for me, especially when one of my greatest fears is feeling like getting older might mean that I don't have anything left to offer society. I want to be useful, and I want to be relevant, and since these characters are, I feel like I have permission now to be hopeful about that. It's pretty awesome to be able to come back to the same show 10 years later and be able to relate to it in a totally new way as I get older. And this kind of shit is totally gas. Definitely used it right that time. But as fire a show as Regular Show is, it's not entirely consistent. A fact which Couch Bobby had become aware of. Oh, he was dimly, yet certainly aware. "Just watch, bro. Watch," said my slow-motion vanilla pudding brain. "Don't stop." Well, I couldn't if I tried. I was well and truly a melted pat of human butter. And as I watched, I noticed. My eyes darted and flitted from scene to scene, and slowly, my brain assembled a new image. One of controversy. In British, that's controversy. I saw an image of ruin. I began to spiral, to panic. What was I doing here? I'm not out here finna ruin anyone's favorite cartoon, least of all mine. What had I become? Just another internet woke scold brandishing my cancel stick at anything that mildly offends me? Note to future self, please remove cancel stick from your lexicon henceforth. It had become painfully clear that I was no longer making an innocent, glowing homage to one of my favorite shows of all time, while also simultaneously tackling the sorts of social problems that I tend to think about even when I'm not high. What I was doing was
leftist media analysis.
all right, fucking chill out. It's not that bad. Season 6, episode 15, I See Turtles. Eileen loves sea turtles, and when she asks the gang if they want to go watch a clutch of baby sea turtles hatch, Mordecai, Rigby, and CJ all accompany her on a beach camping trip. Unfortunately, the stretch of beach in which the eggs have been buried is monopolized by a weird-ass spa cult that is secretly abusing sea turtles as an anti-aging panacea for its rich clientele. The gang has to save them and stop the spa employees and patrons from kidnapping what turns out to be a highly militant and terrifyingly warlike clutch of amphibians. Shout out to PBS Eons.
Amphibians.
This episode deals explicitly with aging and the lengths to which people will go to appear younger.
There's sciencey stuff in turtles that makes you look younger. Just ask this doctor.
Which is a totally understandable thing and actually could be a really great premise, and it is, but the problem here is that while obviously insidious, the motivations that the spa patrons have for perpetrating evil is something about themselves that we all experience. Fear of our own mortality. Getting older is something we can't stop, and That makes the villains relatable, but it also makes all the old people jokes that our heroes make about them feel kinda scummy. Kidnapping and abusing sea turtles is fucking heinous. Their actions are fair game for ridicule and banter, not to mention stylized cartoon carnage, but it's jokes like this that just don't land for me.
The use of baby sea turtles may make you less gross on the outside, but it's sure to reveal how gross you are on the inside.
To me, that felt like a low blow, because aging can make you feel really powerless. Like we talked about earlier, it's hard not to notice how different younger people begin to see you as you get older. Now that I'm in my 30s and that's happening, I feel like I'm the same person I always was, with the glaring difference that actually, I'm not. I'm fundamentally different in a whole lot of ways, except that instead of the entire world unfurling before me like some infinite universe of possibilities, I see the things that I could still realistically achieve before my turn with this set of atoms is done, and they're reconstituted into whatever form they'll become for life after I'm gone. I still dream and hurt and feel everything just as deeply as I did 20 years ago, but it fills me with not a little bit of shame to realize that older people all around me had been feeling all of this too the entire time, but young me was completely blind to it. And that's where it felt like Margaret was coming from with this joke. She didn't just bash their bad actions, she also condemned them just for being old. I don't think the writers intended this to come off as bad as it did to me in the moment, but on this last rewatch, I was just reminded of the revelation I'd had about the older people in my life, and I wonder if I'd have been as oblivious to their experiences if I hadn't been inundated with jokes like this through the media I'd been watching. Or was I digging too deep now? I couldn't help but wonder, did I see this because I was looking for it?
Am I trying to find something to be offended at?
No. Because just like with people, it's worth taking a look at the whole picture before you get judgy. Like Season 7, Episode 5, The Dome Experiment. When Maynard's greed leads him to sell out the whole park crew and subject them to an experiment, Benson's particularness about his organizational methods leads to him becoming a total Rambo badass and saving the park and everyone in it. It's his self-assuredness, which is something that the show has made clear is something that he's only picked up over time with age, that brings out this side of him, that turns him into a badass. Or Season 4, Episode 6, Bald Spot, which is a really complicated and nuanced episode. It addresses something that lots of dudes have to deal with, losing our hair. Though it turns out to be a misunderstanding in the end, Muscle Man spends the episode trying to find ways to cover up or compensate for a bald spot, in fear of losing his girlfriend Starla. It's a strikingly adult plotline, and it treats Mitch Sorenstein like an actual human being. Even though I don't like the way everyone in the skating rink reacts to finally seeing it, it externalizes something that I've kind of found doesn't really bear out in the real world, which is the idea that people perceive baldness itself as gross. I don't think people actually think this way. Once again, I think I can give kids who watch this the wrong idea, but still. The premise really made me feel seen, because I routinely tell my friends to let me know the moment I look like I'm compensating, or like it's time to let go and cut my hair. I know the day will come, and I'd rather embrace it and learn to love myself than try to deny it. And Starla proves that regardless of some problematic framing, that the world is full of awesome people who can see you for who you are, rather than for the effects that come naturally with your body just getting older. Regular Show is not just a great cartoon, it's a great show in itself, despite the missteps that I've talked about here. Pretty much all media has these, because we're people writing shows. Its persistence in the mind of those of us who've loved it over the years certainly proves its impact. By cleverly presenting us with a multi-generational cast of interesting and diverse characters, and giving them all agency in how the show's world is shaped, Mordecai and Rigby's awkward journey through their 20s is about more than that. It's about celebrating friendship regardless of how old you are, showing how intergenerational friendship is not only possible but something to seek out, and it's about understanding that you never stop growing and having something to contribute, regardless of where you are in your life. It reminds me that though I've lost some hair and gained some wrinkles and lingering injuries, I've gained a whole lot of good stuff too. And I think I'll be able to look back someday and say that I've made the best of my time and used what I had to make the world more equitable, more fun, and just generally less shitty in the particular ways that only I could. So what do you think? Did Couch Bobby sink too deep? Heyo. What other examples are there of great depictions of aging in media? Share them with our community in the comments below, and thanks for hanging out to the end of the video. I really appreciate it. It's so exciting to see all your new faces. Hi! Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel if you dig the vibe that we're trying to cultivate here. Share this with a friend who'd be interested in it, and let me know if you'd like to see me tackle some of the many interesting concepts series like Regular Show have addressed in novel and sometimes sloppy ways.
I just really want to make more videos about cartoons.
Hey.